Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute Podcast. And I'm your host, Supreme Decisions. Now, the last few, episodes, I've been speaking about McCoy v. Louisiana. I've also been giving you directives on your actual power in deciding what your case is and your, fate if you're dealing with this. But today I'm going to talk about McCoy v. Louisiana. And the reason being is because I want you to understand that you are more powerful than you actually believe you are. We've been taught that someone else is more powerful. Because I was having a conversation today, and me and my boy, we were actually having a conversation, and it started out with, we were talking about, those that are becoming police officers. And one thing he stated was, yeah, they became a police officer so they can have power. The problem is, you become a police officer to become a servant. A servant doesn't have power. Now, I've given you case law. I've given you the oath. I've given you the actual language for trust. I've given you all of these things. Even the state's constitution, well, one of the ones I gave you was the greatest example was Georgia. And even though I give you all that, and even I give you the Terry v. Ohio show of authority style that states if a police officer gives you instruction without a crime, it is a show of authority stop. Because they only have authority when there is a crime. That's why you have the right to walk away from them when you are not under arrest. That's why you have the right to remain silent. That's why you have the right to not participate in their investigation. Because you don't owe them anything. So whenever they say, well, I'm going to take you down. Oh yeah, I've even showed you that forced ID is illegal. Now, as I go through this, I want you to understand what it is that I'm trying to do. All of these should be red pill type, podcasts or speakings or talks. Call it a Supreme Talk. Actually, if you look on Facebook, Supreme Talk is one of my things. Anyway, I want you to understand what this is. It's the empowerment of you. Showing you that you standing up for you is the best thing for you. Because one of the things I told my grandmother whenever she kept insisting I had an attorney was, I love me more than anybody else does. And we all have to get that in our heads. Because we also have to understand that no one cares about our side. When you are a defendant, you are... I hate to say it this way, but it's in the context. It's the perception that precedes you. Because remember I talked about the initial arrest, you're vilified because they have to be right. You're then having to humanize yourself. You have to enforce things that should be given to you or actually should be expected from you in the sense of you should be innocent based on the fact that the person that's accusing you is the only one that has to prove something. But many of us take it upon ourselves to go ahead and give alibis when we don't have to. We start explaining ourselves when we'll explain ourselves to a perfect stranger, but we'll not do it to someone we actually love and actually share a bed with. I'm going to let y'all let that sink in for a minute. We'll share, in most cases, overshare to someone who doesn't care anything about you, but will not do the same thing for the person that's laying next to you or even in the trenches with you. And once we get in the mindset that we don't have to explain ourselves, you have to prove what you're saying. Like, damn all that. But you also have to understand that it's a mindset that changes. Damn what people are talking about. Because that's what damn what people are talking about. Let them talk. Because whenever they were talking about me, Oh my God, I was the biggest con artist. Oh my God, I was a domestic terrorist. Oh my God, I was David Koresh. And I was like, are you serious? Like, where did all that come from? It came from the mind of someone else that needed to make a villain of a person that they were going to attempt to persecute. But the problem was, I understood how powerful I was. And even in the context that I never at any point explained anything I was doing except in the interview. And that was the whole explanation was they want me to stop teaching. That was my explanation. I didn't have to justify anything that I said or did. They wanted me to stop teaching. And I wanted to go home. That was the interview. Most of us don't even understand that, because even when we're going through something, we're told throughout our life, don't give a long story. Nobody wants to hear that. Give your elevator speech. Be real concise and to the point. Yet we never are concise. We're never precise, and we're never to the point. I'm going to say we're never concise, we're never precise, and we're never to the point. Because we feel that everyone else views the world the exact same way we do. When in fact, no one cares about you or your situation because it's not in their house. But see, here's why that part is important. Your attorney making decisions for you, the person that's representing you, if they're not pushing your agenda, they're pushing their own. If you're not instructing them, they're moving without you. And you are allowing someone else to dictate your life to you. So whenever we're talking about the McCoy v. Louisiana, and we're talking about the employee, because again, you're paying them in some form. You're either paying them through tax dollars or you're paying them directly as your quote unquote paid attorney. Understand that. They are an employee because, again, if you ran a business, the business is you. Because that's what you're in at that moment. You're in the business of you. So what you have to do is understand that this person sitting beside you is your assistant. Yes, they speak for you, but they're speaking what you are to give to them. Because if you have, they're pretty much the manager of your legal defense. They are the manager or your legal action. Let's put it that way. Because either side of the table, you are the one instructing. Doesn't matter what side of the table you're still the one instructing. So they're the legal manager of your legal matter. So you always have to understand that you are the one that's in control. Because even I looked at, what is this? Florida v. Nixon. Nixon was generally unresponsive, right? And basically, the attorney was given instructions. Now, based on the McCoy innocence, was a necessity. It was part of the actual rule. Nixon told his lawyer that he intended to commit perjury. Always understand, when you're doing this, you have to understand the fine lines between attorney-client privilege and the acts of making your attorney an accomplice. Now, when they're asking for your strategy, Nixon actually stated, I'm going to commit perjury because I don't want to do this, because I'm going to maintain innocence. Now, his attorney was like, hey, hold on. Because now, remember, an attorney's first duty is not to you, it's to the court. So the attorney now has to say, I'm not going to be an accomplice in this illegal act. But see, here's the flip side of it. These are the same things that tie up a prosecutor. Say that, understand, because remember when I talked about the Brady list and they're putting a known liar on the stand. If they at any point go against the court by putting a known liar on the stand, they then become liable for the actions of those that are on the stand and their what do you say? They're proceeding prosecution. That's why it becomes malicious. So even if you are doing something and you are stating, hey, I'm going to do this, your attorney has a duty to the court. Now, here's why that's different. Your strategy now to maintain innocence, even if you are not speaking. So let's say Nixon said nothing. You still have to be complicit in the strategy in order for your attorney to act on it. I'm going to say that one. You still have to be complicit with the strategy because the strategy is based on your wanting. Now, if you are insisting on committing perjury, guess who goes down for that? You do. Because you're the one that's going to jail or prison or you're going somewhere. Something's going to happen and you're the one that's going to reap the consequences of it. But when you're thinking about this in totality, right? Understand your obligation is to you. Your attorney obligation is to the court. When you call me, I'm an out-of-town shooter. I don't have any obligation to the court. My obligation is to you and preparing you for your defense. You now have a second hand or actually someone with a knowledge of help implementing a strategy for winning. But you also have to be able to apply that strategy because again, you remember like I told you on yesterday, if you decide to change it or you decide not to implement it, that then is still your decision. Because even if it comes from me and you're choosing to not do something or you're choosing to do something other than what I advise you on, it's still your responsibility. But this is one of the things that I want you to understand. Every aspect of your defense is at your whim for the most part. Now, your attorney will not go against the court because that is not what they are designed to do. And they're going to use the scapegoat of Florida v. Nix. But understand, at every aspect of it, you must be able to go through and expound what it is that you are looking for in your defense. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to agree with every point of the strategy. Because when you're talking about trial management or expectation management, you also have to understand that there will be some battles that you will lose. And you have to be okay with that loss because that loss gets you to another point of battle. Because whenever I ask you at the beginning, what is it you're looking for? The one thing that you have to give me is the one thing that you're willing to sacrifice everything for. That is the difficult question that's going to be asked. But you also have to understand every aspect of the strategy being implemented is done at your prerogative. Now, the maintaining of innocence. The reason why I'm talking about that today and kind of overlapping that with McCoy v. Louisiana is the simple fact that most of us have no idea how to maintain an innocent, how to maintain any innocence. Because most of us have no idea how to properly fight. Because again, our perception of the actual law has been skewed. We've been programmed to believe that those that are in servitude are the ones that are in power. When in fact, those that are in servitude have guidelines they must follow. And it begins with not only federal code, but it begins with the state's organic code. So when we're talking about the maintaining of innocence, one of the things that's not allowed is assumptions. But understanding the simple fact that if I'm going to make sure they're not presuming anything, I'm going to have to do something to revoke them. But it also has to be done in writing. And many of us have no idea how to do that. Because I was even speaking with a young man on yesterday, and it was kind of enlightening. I think that's the best way to describe it. We actually sat down, and he had paid for a 15-minute consultation, and we were speaking about his case, and he talked about how he wanted to challenge jurisdiction. And then he talked about how he hadn't received discovery. But the most important thing was he kept repeating something that the judge said. And I started laughing because, again, it brought me joy. Because they were saying things to him prior to him calling me. Once he started calling me and started implementing the things I told him to implement, their conversation with him changed. It went from, we're going to send you to a mental hospital, to, hey, let's make a deal. And even with that, he began to see that he started attaching liability to those that were part of that prosecution. He even saw how the judge was removing himself from the situation. He saw the application of the art of war from the conversation that I have given him. I'm going to say that one more time. The judge implemented something and gave him something based on information I had given to him that he had applied. The judge then hoped he understood what was being said to him, because the biggest part of a conversation is the ability and the skill of listening. Now, a lot of times you're going to hear me talk about my life in sales, because I wasn't just a good salesman. I was great at what I did. Because even one of the things I learned early was I was told when I was working at Wachovia, say, hey, leave a voicemail. Blah, 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 blah. This is Richard. I'm not available to talk with you now, blah, blah, blah. Nobody left messages for Richard. Right? But one day I'm watching WWE, and one of my dudes is The Rock. So I went back home one day and I recorded this message, and it's been my message for the past 20 years. I apologize for you not having an opportunity to speak one-on-one with the great one, but if you leave your name, number, and time to call back, that opportunity shall arise, and I will hang up. It amazed me at the amount of people that left voicemails for me, because they wanted an opportunity to speak one-on-one with the great one. And it was comical at times, because even my wife at the time referred to me, go over there and speak to the great one. Because whenever I did something, I wanted to not only just be good at it, I wanted to be the best. There was a young man. He played for the Milwaukee Bucks. The name he told me was Miles Clark. That wasn't his name. But I just switched from playing football, and I was trying to play basketball. And I had a lot of athleticism. The one thing that Miles asked me one night, because he was training me, and he would get up like literally 1 o'clock in the morning. We would be out working out and lifting and shooting and working on drills. And he asked me one day, he said, do you want to be good enough to make it to the NBA, or do you want to be a great player? And I looked at him, I said, if I'm going to do it, I might as well be great at it. So the first thing he told me was, copy the best at your position. And I was like, that's crazy. But then that spilled over into when I went to sales, because when I was playing basketball, I watched Michael Jordan, Penny Hardaway, and unfortunately Danny Manning, because Danny was killing it at Kansas. And even Ben Baker, of all people, because in Maceo Baston, Maurice Taylor. See, I'm just throwing out names, but I want you to understand they were great at what they did. And I took a little piece from here, a little piece from there, a little piece from there, and I created something that to me was great. Problem was, I should have got somebody's attitude, because my attitude was shit. But then I had that trickle over to sales. I wasn't very good. I wasn't very charismatic at the time. But then I started listening to Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, hell, even Tony Robbins, Robert Kiyosaki. Because again, it started with a mental change. And then I was like, hold on, I am that dude. So then that transferred over into now going into real estate, going into law. I start studying the best at it. I watched Johnny Cochran. I watched Robert Shapiro. I even go through the literature at Harvard Law. I look at Princeton, Cornell, Brown. But I also don't limit myself to just but my main studies come from those places. Why? Because the best lawyers in the world come from Harvard. We can just ask our, 44th president. But you have to understand the thing that we're looking at is I don't stop. And then I challenge myself against those that I know. And even to the point of prior to going against someone, the one thing I did whenever I played ball was I studied tape. I'll go and watch film to see how good this guy is, how good this young lady, what are their tactics. Because you have to know your opponent just as well as you know yourself. Because you have to understand their tendencies. And then you have to apply things that put pressure on them. I actually took everything that Miles Clark told me about basketball and I applied it to life. And even whenever I talked about things in sales, I actually I would tell people, they'll ask me, well, how are you going to get rid of this? How are you going to do that? How are you going to, I'm using this shit like drugs. I'm going to push this just like I was doing when I was selling drugs. Because my whole point was not to stay a corner boy forever. Because I went from the corner to selling the key in 6 months. I could not be a corner boy. I would not have survived. But when I'm starting to move keys, I can actually be a distributor. But when I was like, okay, I saw what that was. That's not what I'm trying to do. Guess what? Put that dope in the trunk. I can actually move it from across the country. I can do logistics. Because I understood how to use my queens. I'll let y'all catch on. So understanding even in this, I understand how to move in this because I've watched the game being played. I even watched the players. I then start to box them in. Now I'm looking at the game now on a different scale because I'm watching the effects of certain people. Because even with my voice and my reach and the things I talk about, most of you know that most people don't act on it. A lot of people don't hear it. But I appreciate the Young Turks. I appreciate Rashard Ritchie, Dr. Rashard Ritchie. I appreciate the other guys that even in Brother Ben X. I appreciate those that are listening to the things that I'm saying because they have larger platforms. So they get different effects. So even as I'm speaking, it may not seem to be reaching very far, but then it reaches farther than most people think it does. Because sometimes it's the messenger, not necessarily the message. And even my delivery at times, I've been told, you lacked a lot of tact. You could have said it differently. Maybe I don't need to. Maybe me saying it wasn't for you. It was for someone else. So you may not like the way I'm giving it, but maybe the delivery isn't for you. It's for someone else. Because I get that. I am not an easy pill to swallow for everyone. But somebody else saying the exact same thing can get you to where you need to be. But the whole idea is to understand no matter what you have to do, there has to be a point of study. There has to be a point and a desire for mastery. You have to want to be greater today than you were yesterday. Because you'll hear me talk about Kaizen. That is exactly what Kaizen is. Being better today than you were yesterday. You have to create something different. You have to want to build to something new. You can't be the same person today that you were yesterday. Because I even talked to one young lady and we were having a conversation and we were talking about her case. and I explained to her how to be a monster. And one of the things she noted was the fact that she said, you know what? I'm starting to feel different, and I don't like it. And I told her, I said, that's because the old you can't go to the next level. The new you is the one that's leaving. That's why everything around you is starting to change, because you are changing. Because even in a video game, you have to go against the big boss most of the time, several times before you actually master how to beat him to go to the next level. You cannot go to the next level without change. You have to grow. You have to be different. Sometimes you have to get new weapons. You definitely have to have a different mentality. And even doing that, when you're taking over your own case, that takes a different thought pattern. That takes a pattern of rejection. That also takes a pattern of acceptance, because not only do you need to be able to be led, you have to be able to apply what's leading you. You have to be able to look at the things and not pay attention to the defiance. Those that try, you have to not pay attention to Agent Smith, because anybody can be Agent Smith. Some cases, my case was one of my best friends. He was Agent Smith. He didn't even realize it. My sister-in-law, she was Agent Smith. She didn't even realize it. My grandmother, Agent Smith, didn't even realize it. And it's not because they didn't believe in me. It was the fact that they believed everyone else that was not me. You're going to get there. I was able to hear the rejection and keep it pushing. I was able to keep a smile on my face because I understood how powerful I was. Even at the time, my wife was scared to death. That Friday, that Monday when I walked out the house, she said, I'll see you Friday. And she said that because she had to train her own mind to believe that I was the great one. She had to believe I believed who I was in order for me to even say it. She had to understand that she couldn't become Agent Smith because I didn't need anything. I probably couldn't have taken another Agent Smith, especially not from the person laying beside me in the bed. So when we're talking about this, and you talk about the facing of the most scary thing that you'll ever face, I looked at 2,000 plus years in prison for something. Because here's the thing, I'm never going to say I didn't commit a crime. I just didn't commit that one. And I knew they couldn't prove that one. So even when my brother's attorney wanted us to put a lesser inclusive charge in there, I said, nope, leave it overcharged. And unfortunately, John Melvin agreed with me. He just didn't like the word overcharged. But that's exactly what it was. Was I guilty of something? Absolutely. I'll give you that. I was guilty of something. It wasn't that. I wasn't guilty of RICO. But at the same time, I understood the context. I understood what she didn't believe because she didn't know who I was. She didn't understand I was the great one. She didn't understand that I had studied John Melvin. I knew more about John Melvin than John Melvin's wife did. I knew more about John Melvin than anyone in the courtroom. I knew John Melvin just as well as John Melvin knew him, because of what Miles Clark taught me. And it's my desire to have been better. And I was able to apply the things that were taught to me. Because I can even talk about the ideas of another young man. He's out in Chicago. He helped me a lot. And a lot of people even ask me about him. And I often tell people there are specialties in certain things. Everybody's good at something. This person, he's very good at what he does that's over here. I'm very good at what I do right here. There are other people that help me, like Colonel Wilson, that help me move around so I would not have issues. Now, a lot of people didn't like the way that Colonel Wilson did his thing, but that had nothing to do with me because Colonel Wilson's life is his. But at the same time, Colonel Wilson didn't dictate what I applied in my life because my life is my choice. Because I'm the one that has to suffer the consequences of any thought or action or inaction that I decide to participate in. And this is how you have to start viewing your cases. And also you have to understand something, and to me it's one of the most, I guess, underserved, taken for granted, whatever thing you want to attach to it, is that people think time is on their side. Well, I've got all the time in the world. Did you know that you give a court jurisdiction if you accept a continuance? Did you know that? Most people didn't. Did you know that one particular thing that you can do is stop the jurisdictional challenge on your first motion? Most people have no idea how to even do it or how to even challenge jurisdiction properly. But they'll do it because they saw it on the internet. They'll do it and they'll say, well, that guy did it this way. Or they're expecting the paperwork to fight for them. I don't know about you, but I've never been afraid of a piece of paper. Unless we're talking about 1,000 paper cuts. If that's what we're talking, I might not even been afraid then, because it still has to do something. Somebody else has to do something with that paper in order for me to get 1,000 cuts. So why would someone else be afraid of me sending paper? Because if I don't know how to defend that paper, if I don't know how to apply that paper, if I don't know how to actually make that paper work, get it? Because that's why it's called paperwork. If I don't know how to make that paper work, it is useless. And if I'm wasting time, I then allow for someone else to build strategy. Because even one of the things that I talked about even in the time of the principles of chess, allowing or stalling for time, procrastination only allows your opponent to get the advantage. That's why you have things like speed chess, because it allows you to think on your feet and you have to move faster. You have to actually have your next 2 or 3 moves in your head ready to go no matter what happens. But understanding that one little aspect, time, that gap in time only allows for those that are preparing for you, that's actually studying you, that's actually looking for things to actually make you move and put pressure on you. It only gives them time to do that. Stalling, procrastination, only gives your opponent time to prepare for you and give them the advantage. That's why I spoke about yesterday waiting to 2 days before to want to contact me. You're already at a disadvantage when you're contacting me. And then you're putting me at a disadvantage to even help you. Because now everything I'm saying now is more difficult to apply, because we have to allow certain concessions. Why? Because it doesn't change the law. And it also doesn't allow for certain things. And it also gives the court, when you don't give them 10 days, it allows something to seep in called ambush. Because it's actually a tool that you could use. I'm going to say that one more time. If you don't give someone 10 days or time to prepare, there's this thing called ambush. And it allows the court to not allow a motion that you're filing, not allow a challenge that you're setting up. Because remember, I talked about principles of chess. Principle number 1, get your hand out in position early. Set your position up early. And most of us don't understand how to do that. And then when we get that, because your fight date happens the day you get the citation. Your fight date happens the day you get your notice. Your fight date, all of that starts at the time that you know you have a court date. Because now you have an arena, you have an opponent, and you also have a time. Because even fighters get 6 weeks to train. So when you're doing that, understand, if you're waiting to the last minute, you're waiting to day 28 to set up your fight, you've already lost. But it's a mindset of, you knew on day 1 if you were going to take over your own case or your own defense. You knew that immediately. But now you have a choice. Are you going to apply that choice? Because it doesn't matter who's sitting beside you. It's you that have to make the decision on what they're doing and how they're doing it. Always remember that. You are the most powerful person in that courtroom. You are the most powerful person at that defense table. You are the one that decides what strategy is being implemented. That does not rely on your mouthpiece or your representation. Because even this, understanding no blanket rule demands the defendant explicit consent to implication of any strategy. Right? There's no rule that demands it. However, whenever you are deciding a strategy, you are the only one that can change it. And to maintain innocence, it must be done at the beginning. You start off with the maintaining of innocence from the jump. You decide if it's changed, no matter what your mouthpiece does. Because you are the one that have to go through everything. You're the one that have to apply. You're the one that's going to actually end up either being rewarded or suffering. You are the most important person in any aspect of that. Why? Because you are the reason everyone else is there. And when we're looking at getting a public defender, understand an attorney assigned to you by the court is not a bad thing. It's the judge covering his ass, because now if they're assigning an attorney to you, they're stating that there are criminal penalties to your matter. So then that gives you one strategy. Because now your case is to be looked at not as an administrative case, but one with criminal penalties. So therefore, you now set up a criminal defense. Now, what was funny to me was because I had a young man, he was being sued civilly. And the opposing attorney kept telling him, well, no, well, it's not a criminal case, it's not a criminal case. And then he pretty much showed him, okay, you're telling me this is on this civil case. And he says, yes. Said, well, that is a crime under Texas code. So the attorney goes, well, I'm not asking for jail time, so that is not a crime. Okay, cool. Then that has to come off, because that is not a civil action. Well, I'm not asking for jail time, so it's okay. It's okay. He then proceeded, because he asked then for discovery for what they were supposed to be in court for. He said, well, he's not helping me out in this case. So he should be found in contempt of court. Just as I told him it was going to happen, he turns and tells him, hey, if it's contempt of court, that means, one, that there's a prior note already into the case, which means there's a prior contract or a prior decision. She said, but two, if you're asking for jail time, then this is a criminal proceeding, which requires criminal discovery. But you also have to understand the context of not just wanting to talk to tell your side. You have to be a willing listener. You have to participate in the act of listening, because words have power, and then using those words against the speaker. I'm going to say that again. And using the words you hear against the speaker, because one of the things you have on your behalf is the stenographer for the transcripts. It's being recorded. And even if it's redacted, you can then ask for the original unredacted copies if it's disputed. And if you also notice, most of those stenographers carry a recording device. That's something you can also subpoena from a certain hearing. But understand, notice what I said, you can subpoena. You can challenge. Understand how you have the power? But you have to understand the act of McCoy is not just standing up and saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to, and not even in the maintenance of maintaining innocence. It's the act of understanding that you can change the narrative of a guilty decision, because you are powerful beyond your imagination. Because contrary to what you've been told, you have the ability to challenge. Because even one of the things, the court has a duty to aid someone that is representing their own interests. So therefore, it gives you an advantage by representing yourself. Whoops. And here's the great part about it. When you understand the application and you understand and you know what? If you actually decide to accept the accountability for oneself, the world changes for you. When you look at the ideals of who you are and what the law allows for you and even against you, you become different. You become something someone doesn't want to challenge. Because generally when a bully is used to bullying, they don't like confrontation. So they go into intimidation. So now when they can't intimidate you, they start messing with the people around you. And when they understand that even the people around you don't carry the weight they thought it did, you become dangerous to them. They decide to leave you alone because they understand a fool with a purpose. Like, hell, this bastard's not going to pay us anyway. And the only thing we can do is dig ourselves into a hole and piss this fool off. That's it. And when they get to that point, that's when you decide that, one, you start living life differently. Because you understand self-governing. You understand the point of not vexing these idiots. And I mean it that way. Because 90% of the people that are making decisions for you, like a cop choosing to make you a criminal. A prosecutor choosing to listen to the cop who doesn't know law to accept something without probable cause to charge you with, and then you going in to work with someone who works for the prosecution, even if you're paying them, to have a decision made by someone who is over all of them except you, because you voted them into place. And making that type of decision in partnership is dangerous, to especially think that you're just going to go in there and they're just going to give it to you because you wrote down something on paper. When I talked about confrontation, because we have a confrontational system. If you are not willing to confront, if you're not willing to look the devil in the eye, self-defense is not for you, because that's what it is. It's literally defending of oneself. If you're looking for paper to do it, you're doing the wrong thing. If you can't direct or accept the responsibility of defending you, even when someone else is your mouthpiece, you don't deserve to actually be there. You deserve to have someone else speaking for you. You deserve whatever happens for you. Because the whole context of being here is because you want independence. You want to be self-reliant. You don't want to just listen to someone just because they say something. You don't want to be just part of the number because they said something. You want to make sure if they're coming to get you, that they have to fight to get you. Because that was the one thing I told them whenever they were talking about a deal. The deal was 20 years per count on 108 counts. That was the deal. And I looked down and I was like, you're an idiot if you think I'm going to give you 20 years per count. If you think I'm going to give you 20 minutes for any count. Because I need restitution for the time I did spend in there. Those 72 days were long. But I want you to understand something. I was willing for that fight. I was ready for that fight. Because even like I said in the last episode, the one thing that I was willing to do was lose everything. I became so angry that all I could see was destruction. And it, in a sense, destroyed everything I had. And I even told you if I had that decision to make again, I would make it 100 out of 100 times. I stand by that because I had a greater purpose behind it. It wasn't just to be sitting up here winning. It wasn't about winning one case. Always remember that. And understand, any challenge that you have, you're going to keep facing it until you beat it. You have to be willing to give up something. In order to go to the next level, you have to be willing to go give up something. Even in accountability, you have to be willing to give up something. A lot of people call that being vulnerable. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. Because the brighter your star becomes, the more people, more cowards are going to come out and say lies about you. They're going to say things about you. They're going to throw stones and hide their hands. They're going to become more vile with you. They're going to have more vicious statements because they're looking for a reaction to see how they can get into you. You have to be ready for that. Because I even have somebody, well, what are the police going to do? It's a good chance, because even with myself, I got death threats from police officers. I'm going to say that the police actually called me with death threats. Well, how do you know they were police? Well, cool. I'm going to give you another little piece of my life. One of the things I am at one point was very fluent with was a computer. I also understood this thing called skip tracing. I did that in a former life. Because I think I even told you guys about, what they call busting credit cards, busting checks. I did that. I would go through, I would even assume identities. Those were things I did. I even told you about Officer Buglinali in Gwinnett County. He decided he was going to throw his card on the ground and look crazy at me. And I asked his story, hey, mind if I sit here for a few minutes and use some Wi-Fi? 10 minutes later, I called Buglinali on a cell phone that was unlisted. I gave him a list of his wife, his children, his parents, their former addresses. 10 minutes. So whenever you ask me certain things, I can give you answers. Because even like a couple of my trolls, mainly the one I did Miss San Fran girl, right, who changed her name to Harley Quinn and then changed it to something else. There was a time I was like, I was just holding off. I'm going to hold off on it. Because when you go after your enemies, you go after them wholly and to destroy them. I understood her level of loneliness because I understood I wasn't the only person she did this to. The problem was I was the only one that actually did something publicly, and I had a larger platform than most people had with her. But what she didn't know was I've got several of her IP addresses. And then I also pulled up multiple addresses. One I believe is a work address. The other one I believe is her apartment. I know these things. But it's not the time. It's not the time to go after her. It's not the time to implement the art of war or even implement the prince. Because there is a time for everything, and right at this moment, she's not important yet. But there will become a day that she will be important to me. Might be during one of my petty sessions. And I'm going to just drop everything I have. But I said that to say this. I took on the responsibility of giving out information. I guess what you would call making myself vulnerable, making myself a target for the most part. But what is funny is most of the ammo that most of these people will use or can use is already gone. Because my son asked me one day, he said, well, with this era, could somebody come back with a Me Too stuff? I said, son, I'm be real assholish about it. I said, they've called me a domestic terrorist. I'm pretty sure not much can be worse than that. And he started laughing. Because they put me as a terrorist. You are a terrorist. I'm on the FBI's most wanted list as a domestic terrorist. For what? Cool. So what can be worse than that? But I also took the responsibility of when my brother told mom, I'm not getting a lawyer if Richard doesn't get one because he has the most to lose. He stood right there. He looked mom in the eye. He said that. I accept the responsibility. I put that weight on my shoulders as well. I took the responsibility of my other brother, who was third chair, because he was able to implement a strategy that I gave him, because he was willing to walk blindly, because he had faith enough that I did what I was supposed to do. When we went home, at no point did he ever critique me or downplay anything that I've done. The one thing he did was thank me. And then he repeated the lines that pissed me off. Line upon line, precept upon precept. Don't vex these people and understand everything you do has a process. When you're doing any of these things, if you even do them out of order, you are going to run into something that you may not be able to handle, because you have to understand, knowing is half the battle. If I know they're not practicing law, I know they're prone to violence, I know they don't know law, I know they're not very intelligent, why would I then do something to vex them? Or even, as I told my son, don't even give them a reason to talk to you. Because even if they talk to me, it's so programmed in me, I don't consent. One of my son's first words is, I don't consent. And I wanted to punch him in his little face because he kept saying it. I don't consent. I don't consent. I don't consent. But it's something that was practiced. He kept hearing it. He then kept repeating it. So even now, even with me, those are the first words that come out of my mouth whenever I see someone in uniform. I don't consent. Well, you don't mind if I search your vehicle. I don't consent. Well, is it okay if I search? I don't consent. Because I don't consent cannot be misconstrued. Because yes and no can be interpreted as implied consent. But me flat out saying I don't consent, I've taken the responsibility of that can't even be used against me. And that's even before we even get to a point of McCoy v. Louisiana. That's even before we even set up a fight date. It's understanding, if I'm going to stand, the stand starts with me. If it is to be, it will be me. I don't allow anybody else to speak for me. Because even one of the bad habits I see with a lot of people is, because even I asked my homeboy today, because we were talking about one of the things I said, and I call police unintelligent. I say it constantly. Matter of fact, I think I say it every show, how unintelligent police are. And he go, well, I don't think you should say it that way. And I asked him flat out, why is it you would go to defend someone that is there to speak for themselves, have the ability to speak for themselves, but you choose the fact that you're going to argue for them and they're not arguing against what I'm saying? They have the ability to, no, I'm very intelligent. And they're probably very good with those blocks. But they're choosing not to say anything. And it's not like I just started saying it yesterday. I've been saying this for 5 years. I also been talking about the amount of police officers I speak to. I also talk about the amount of police officers that follow me. I talk about the FBI agents that follow me, the judges that follow me, the prosecutors that follow me. I even talk about how they enlist my assistants. None of them have ever argued with me about any of the things I've said. But yet, I have people that speak up that have done nothing. But that's what being responsible and taking care of, stepping out in front of, and accepting accountability for your shit looks like. Because it's easy for someone to say something and not have anything to back that up. And it's easy if I go, let me tell you why that happened. And it's not necessary. Because this one lady, you was a drug dealer. Absolutely. How's that change Terryville, Ohio? How's that change the Minnesota Bad Police Department? How's that change any of that stuff? Well, you shouldn't even talk about it. Why shouldn't I talk about it? Because if I don't say anything about it, did it not happen? Because then we go into if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? It doesn't change that the tree is still falling. But the thing is, if I'm quiet, if I don't talk about it, it's easy to create a narrative. It's easier to keep you in the dark. It's easier to control you when you don't know there are other options. But see, that's where you accepting responsibility for you comes in there. That's why I talk about the right to defend is personal. And a defendant's choice in exercising that right must be honored out of that respect of the individual, which is his lifeblood of law. Because, and I'm going to give you another, because that comes from Illinois v. Allen, and it's a 1970 case. But also, McCassell v. Wiggins, and it's a 1984 case. The right to appear pro se exists to affirm the dignity and the autonomy of the accused. When you are doing this, you're pressing upon your imprint. You're exercising your right to be innocent, to be heard, but you have to do it in a personal manner. It's your choice. Your strategy is implemented. Your ideals are expressed. Even if they're wrong. Because now you don't have to live and die by somebody else's vices. You can actually imprint your own. And that way, if you lose, you know it was from your efforts, not somebody else. Because when you're blaming somebody else for your innate behavior, you're the one still losing. Because to the victor go the spoils. If you lose, you are the one that's going with the consequences. So why should it not be your choice? Because again, the right to appear pro se exists to affirm the dignity and the autonomy of the accused. The right to be presumed innocent. Your choice of strategy. And it must be honored because it's the lifeblood of law. So when you're understanding this, all of this is done through necessity. It's done through acceptance. It's done through understanding. Because when you're going through this, it's the context, not necessarily of all or nothing, right? You can use the assistance. Because let's say you have someone as adept as a Robert Fuel, right? You can use his assistance because he has cachet with the court. His present. He's like the Michael Jordan. He's your Michael Jordan, your Scottie Pippen. It doesn't matter because even B.J. Armstrong got a ring. Most of y'all don't even know who that is. But he got a ring. John Sally, because most of y'all don't even know John Sally got a ring with the Bulls too. But you have to understand, it doesn't matter that Michael Jordan is right there in the courtroom. It doesn't matter how far down on the bench. Because did you know that Giannis Antetokounmpo's baby brother, who is now on the Bucks, won a ring with the Lakers, and he didn't even play? Matt Barnes won a ring with the Warriors. He doesn't even want it. But he was there, but he didn't play. So understanding, you don't have to be in the game to win. But you also have to be part of the strategy for it to be. Matt had to cheer. John Sally had to do some cheering. Baby Antetokounmpo did some cheering. But he was prepared. All of them were prepared. They accepted their roles. And your role may not be speaking. Because again, my younger brother, he's not a speaker. He's not as charismatic as I am. which is why the great one was sitting in first chair. He was sitting in third. He still won. He's still on that only one in Georgia to win Pro Se. He's still on there. He just wasn't first chair. He still got the W. My other brother, he had an attorney. He still won. He just didn't do it pro se. He still was on the case. So you have to understand, just because there's a mouthpiece there doesn't mean that your strategy and your interest is null and void. You still have to have the acceptance, because just like I talked about my baby brother, he still accepted his role because, again, that was his choice. Whenever he spoke the words I gave him. Whenever he cross-examined the things that I had wanted him to cross-examine about, because he was implementing a strategy that not only he chose, he accepted. And he had an opportunity to win even though he wasn't first chair. Because understanding, the choice is not all or nothing. You have the ability to keep it pushing. You have the ability to implement, because the right to defend is personal. And it doesn't get more personal than your life, your liberty, hell, your pursuit of happiness, whatever the hell that might be. And what you have to understand is, if you're reading in Gannett Company v. D. Pasquale, it's a 1979 case. The Sixth Amendment contemplates a norm in which the accused, not a lawyer, is the master of his own defense. Say that one more time. The Sixth Amendment contemplates a norm in which the accused, not a lawyer, is the master of his own defense. So when someone else is telling you, you have to do what I'm telling you. No, I do not, because I am the master of my own defense. The defense itself is personal. You are just an assistant. And once you understand those roles and accept those roles, you are then able to not only defend yourself, but you have the ability to control those that are speaking on your behalf.